increase to the capital fund reserve for 908,179. But we did receive unexpected amount of revenue from the PPRT money, which is the personal property replacement tax, which has been conservative in the past, but this past year has been quite rewarding actually in that regard. It offsets some of our costs. So another noted one is the 91,241 into the service and expenses, and that's for building repairs, but it's also for Farnsworth to do the work that they're doing for the condition assessment report that we've had preparing for and doing the remodel for the next couple of years. So
Trustee Milawambo, we also need to do a roll call.
Oh, okay.
sorry.
Well, yeah, I guess that would be important. Let's do a roll call.
All right. Trustee Walsh. Trustee Matney.
here,
Trustee Emig's absent. Trustee Becker.
Here.
Trustee Milawambo.
Here,
Trustee Bolin.
Here.
Trustee Urban's absent. Trustee Ward.
here.
Trustee Crable.
Here.
Trustee Crumpler.
here.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The roll is called. I get so excited about these meetings. I could have them by myself. So we, at this point, I think we are going to open it up for the public to, if there are any public comments with regards to the amended budget. No?
No.
No? Okay, all right. Council, does anybody have any questions? I know we discussed this last time. Okay, no questions, and I'm gonna go ahead and close the public hearing. Thank you. And, well, we have 5 minutes actually, before we start township, so. Okay, good evening once again. For those who were not here earlier, we had a pre-party, pre-township party. Next time, come earlier. So we're going to go ahead and call the meeting of the City of Bloomington Township to order. And if everyone could stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
Okay. Madam Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Trustee Walsh.
Here.
Trustee Bolin,
Here.
trustee Matney,
Here.
trustee Emig is absent, trustee Becker.
Here.
Trustee Urban, who's absent, trustee Ward,
Still here.
trustee Crable,
Here.
trustee Crumpler,
Here.
trustee Malonba.
Here. The next item on our agenda is the consent agenda. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Okay, moved by trustee Crable and then sort of looks like second by trustee Ward. And do we have a link or just roll call?
Just roll call.
Okay.
Trustee Walsh. Trustee Bolin,
Yes.
trustee Matney,
Yes.
trustee Becker,
Yes.
trustee Ward,
Aye.
trustee Crable,
Yes.
trustee Crumpler,
Yes.
trustee Malonba.
Yes, and the next item on the agenda is the adoption of the fiscal year 2023 amended budget for which we had a hearing earlier. Is there a motion?
I'll move adoption.
Okay,
I'll
moved
second.
by trustee Ward and seconded by trustee Bolin. And Madam Clerk?
Trustee Walsh,
Yes.
trustee Bolin,
Yes.
trustee Matney,
Yes.
trustee Becker,
Yes.
trustee Ward,
Aye.
trustee Crable,
Yes.
trustee Crumpler,
Yes.
trustee Malonba.
Yes, next item on the agenda is the adoption of the fiscal year 2023 tax levy for tax year 2022 as requested by the township supervisor. And is there a motion? Not all at once?
I will make a motion.
Okay, motion by trustee Bolin. Is there a second? Okay, second by trustee Crumpler.
Trustee Walsh,
Yes.
trustee Bolin,
Can we say something?
Oh, you'd like to say something? Oh, okay.
I just
Sorry.
want to know if the levy is the same as last year. Okay, great. Thank you. Yes.
So-
trustee Matney,
Yes.
trustee Becker,
Yes.
trustee Ward,
Aye.
trustee Crable, trustee Crumpler,
Yes.
trustee Malonba.
Yes. The next item on the agenda is report by elected official. We'll start with Township Supervisor Skillroot.
Okay, I'm going to say that louder. It's the same as the last 5 years. I'll start with that.
Mhm.
All right. I have a couple of things. I did not supply the system board report of statistics, so I kind of wanted to briefly go through a little bit of that. I was looking at all of the in-process cases that we have at Township. Now that means those that have not fulfilled all of their, no, these are the ones that are denied. Sorry. We have 40 that are in process. We always have that many waiting for people to provide documentation. But this is the denied section. We had 27 that didn't, out of 53, we had, out of 53 denials in general assistance, we had 27 or 21 of them be moved to the emergency assistance and receive assistance that way. So they get denied general assistance, then they move into emergency assistance. And then 27 didn't turn in verification. So that's a good majority of what the problem is. And then 1 falsified documentation, 3 were over income for both general assistance, emergency assistance, and 1 exhausted TANF, which means at this point, they're not able to seek assistance. So basically, the majority still is the same problem, that people do not completely turn in their verification information that we need to be able to serve them. We are doing all that we can by making phone calls to them, giving them updates on what's left to do. At this point, there's not a whole lot more other than we hold hands and help them through every single step, which is very difficult to do because it's their personal information. So we feel like we're doing the best we can. And then I wanted to share with you a case that's coming up because the HERE program is already being talked about. And I have one particular case that came about today, and we're holding off for your approval of that, which thank you. There's a single woman of one child, and she had surgery, then she had COVID, and she couldn't work. So she's behind on rent, utilities, this and that. She's eligible for EA, emergency assistance, but she needed much more than that to be able to pay the rent. So we're holding off on helping her until after this board meeting, because we can help her completely get her out of the situation she's in, and she starts her job again, because sustainability in job is important with the HERE program. The HERE program, if for those who don't understand it, is the housing eviction relief efforts that township is doing for $200,000 applied from what used to be the CERT program through COVID, and moving it into this program to help with utility, mostly rent, but utilities as well, to help people overcome the situation they're in terms of arrears, so they can continue to work, but then now be able to maintain their ability to pay their bills. So anyway, this particular person, a mom of one, is going to be able, if determined eligible, but she looks really good at this point, and we're asking her to hold off until a couple of days from now so we can help her completely get out of this situation. So these are the ones that are popping up a lot now. So any questions? Yeah.
Yeah, I have a question regarding the information that needs to be provided. Do you have any statistics on like what kind,
What kind of what?
what kind of documentation that they're failing?
Oh,
to
it's
provide?
similar to the EA and the emergency assistance and general assistance.
Okay.
We stay similar to that. They have to provide income, assets, and residency, because they have to be living in the city of Bloomington for us to expend taxpayer dollars
Right.
from the city of Bloomington. So that's an important piece. And then they have to have sustainable income. So we look at a number of things: employability, how long they've been employed. We want them to be employed for at least 30 days. And
That-
bank
well,
statements,
Yeah, that does,
all that.
this sounds horrible. That doesn't sound like a lot of documentation.
No, it's a lot for individuals. Although we've improved the situation a lot, we're right in the middle of preparing to have access to the Department of Human Services, which slows people down by having to go there or get online to get the information we need. So that's already happening now. And all the documentation that we've done has been put in place. We're just waiting on login information for that, and then do some training as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Trustee.
And so are any other townships signed up to get this information directly from the state?
IES, the system from Department of Human Service, yes, other townships are.
And-
And I'm actually going to teach that at some
Okay.
point, because I think some of these rural townships find it much more difficult to be able to provide assistance and seek the information that they need, which we want standards and consistency in how townships across the state do this. And it's by law that we have to do that. So.
But are there townships that have been approved and
Yes.
and
Yes.
do we see that the processing times are shortened and more people are getting approved for aid?
No, it's not more people getting approved. It's getting the information we need in a reasonable time.
Right, but there, if you
But
don't,
that speed is there with being able to access it ourselves.
right, but if they don't provide you the information, they're effectively denied because they didn't provide the information.
Correct. But that's why it's sped up in that regard. You're right in that regard, that yes, if they don't provide the proper information, it's already been seen that we're not able to help them because they didn't give us the information we need to verify eligibility.
And that person you spoke about with regard to the HERO program, is that somebody that's went through general assistance, went through emergency assistance, provided all the documentation?
Yes.
Didn't qualify?
No, did qualify for emergency assistance. We're doing this on top of that to recover the rest of what she needs.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
And
thank you.
so we already have the information for her. We can roll her over into this particular situation, but the HERE program also includes several different groups of individuals that we can't serve.
Right.
And so that's an important piece to open it up a
Okay.
little more.
Thank you.
Okay, trustee Ward.
Yeah,
Hi.
Ms. Skillroad, you talked about the program that you're getting underway that will speed things up. Will that resolve the whole issue, or do you see other barriers that are keeping people from giving you the information that they would need to be approved?
That's a good question. We see lots of barriers. Some of that comes from landlords not providing the information. A lot of times the landlords at this, because of COVID and all of the lack of receiving funds from the renters and the accumulation of debt that the renters have for the landlords, some of them are just saying, nope, we're not going to accept it, even if you have the majority of the money. We're trying to get it to the point where we have all of their arrears up to a point. We have a maximum amount. But trying to get them to the point where they have the potential of still being able to stay there because the landlord should accept a full payment. Right. So that's
Any
what we're
other
kind of-
barriers?
Oh, where they live, just, it's all income driven or asset driven. So if they have more vehicles than they should, they're allowed one. I mean, there's a lot of parameters. The barriers that I see is just being able to get that paperwork in.
Well, that's what I'm getting
Yeah.
at is what are the barriers for them to get the paperwork in?
Oh, walking versus, computer illiteracy is a big one. That's why we're trying to do that for them.
Okay.
Yeah, in that particular situation. Just the overwhelming feeling probably with it, I think. I mean, every organization, especially government organization, has a lot of paperwork that has to be provided to prove that somebody could potentially be eligible. And ours is not unlike them as well.
So what would keep us from holding their hand as you?
Well, I
We're
think what we're
describing.
doing is keeping them from holding our hand. We're able, I mean, if we can knock out some of the paperwork just by pressing, getting into a portal to look at the documentation that we need to see, then that's keeping them from having to go over the Department of Human Services and wait in line and get a paper signed, or go to the library and try to get on the web portal themselves, which a lot of people don't have that ability to do. I mean, just not understanding computers. So we're doing what we can to just accommodate that. We can't do much for landlord tenant relationship other than focus on any wrongful issues and sending them to Prairie State Legal. So,
Yeah, I'm just raising it
Yeah,
because I
no,
mean,
I-
if there are barriers that continue to be there,
yes.
let's
Well-
chip away at them.
And I do review the denials that we see. And that's an important piece because that's how I increase the income guidelines that hadn't been increased in a while because we were seeing too many denials. And so by increasing those income levels and increasing the threshold of the poverty level, then we can help those individuals more. And so that's income guidelines are a barrier for a number of people. What I think that we serve them in two different ways, through general assistance and emergency assistance.
I just hope that if we see patterns of, reasons why they can't come up with certain pieces of paper,
We look at it all.
Then-
I review
then
it all the
let's-
time.
let's address those.
Mhm. I
Yeah.
do review it all the time.
Great.
Okay, other questions for Township Supervisor Skillwood? Okay, thank you. Now we're gonna move on to report by Assessor Steve Scudder.
Good evening. Today was the last day to file a complaint form with the County Board of Review for the value of your property if you didn't agree with the assessment you received 30 days ago. Right now, we're seeing smaller amounts of complaints coming in than we have in the past. And that same trend was relayed on to me. The county has seen the same lower amounts of appeals coming in for the whole county. So we're in the same line with everyone else.
Thank you. Trustee Crumpler?
Thank you. Thank you, trustee. Mwambe. This is actually, I have a couple of questions. I think this first one is for Steve. I'm wondering about, how much the increases from the new property assessments will increase the property values of people who own rental property, like on an average. Do you have any sense of that?
We can only track rental properties by if they qualify for an exemption through the county.
Okay,
If they have an exemption, we can say they're not being rented because they wouldn't be eligible. So our data on knowing if it's a rental or not a rental would be skewed just by the fact that we don't have that information. The value increase as a whole on all the properties did go up,
right.
including the rentals. But those increases with the assumption would be with the low complaints coming in, that those values may have been low
Okay.
to begin with. And now we're just getting them up to value. So people are accepting the value versus complaining about it.
Okay.
So I
Yeah.
don't know.
No, that makes sense. Thanks. And I guess I have a second question that I think is related. I guess this may be for Deb a little bit. Now, I'm wondering how township, residents whose rent goes up, right, as a result of increase of property values. How is the township anticipating working with working with renters whose rent increases? I know you started to talk a little about that a little bit. Is it general fund? Are there other revenue resources that might be access to help our residents in those situations?
The HERE program is general town fund, and that's where we're seeing that we can help the most with it.
Okay.
We do work with the landlords and the tenants, which are our applicants, and try to coordinate working with them to avoid the eviction. Like if you wait another month, we have this program that's possibly going to be in place. And we have there was one that was based on a corporation that wasn't from around here that wouldn't do it. But for the most part, the landlords have been waiting it out to see what we can help with and how we can help through the housing eviction relief efforts with that program.
Right.
So
And and just one more thing, is it your sense that those funds will reduce potential evictions in this community in the next 6 months?
it is our hope, all of the staff's hope. But when we provide funds and we can't provide the whole amount that is being asked for, we require the landlord to have a stay of eviction for at least the 30-day time frame that it fits. And that's just to give a little bit more edge for the applicant or the tenant to find other funds in another way. So
Thank you both. Appreciate it.
Trustee Bowman?
Yeah, I have a question. In the minutes that we approved today, there was correct me if I'm wrong, the township was evaluating based on neighborhood, but then the county put an equalizer on that. Can you explain?
So you're talking to me.
Yes. You do the assessment.
Well, the assessments, we made adjustments. We use mass appraisal to make adjustments to the assessments, taking sale prices that we see over the past 3 years and measure them against the assessments that they have. So by neighborhood and location, we got small pockets of community that we can make adjustments up or down to the whole neighborhood. And which kind of equalizes the whole city. And then on commercial side, we kind of look at the uses of the properties. Most of the analysis comes from residential properties. And then when we submitted our books to the county, through the state's efforts with the ratio work, the county saw that we didn't shift around enough assessment value to equal the sale price value that we were seeing to those sales. So the county again added another multiplier on top of what we did adjusting, and that multiplier went to everybody in the city at the same time. So that kind of moved the whole city up.
Okay. Well, I don't want to share too much personal information, but the neighborhood that I live in, basically has not had sales. There's still empty lots. There's no plans for development, and yet 9% increase, which is higher than inflation. So that was hard. That's a hard pill to swallow. My,
That's a
My-
9% increased to assessment.
Mhm.
So the market value raised that increase up. When you say 9%, 2.5% came to the whole county, the whole city at the same time from the county. So
okay.
we may have adjusted at 7%. I'm not aware of what neighborhood you exactly live in, but we
Okay.
do have a report that we, if we have enough sales in a neighborhood, typically we're looking for at least 10 to either shift it up or down. So if we saw, and when you're talking your neighborhood, we have only 115 neighborhoods. When we say neighborhood, it might not be this block on
Okay.
Gridley Street.
Sure.
It's going to be a wider area. When you're talking, a couple of the larger neighborhoods are on the west side and the south end of town. There's several properties in it, so your neighborhood might not be restricted to what maybe you see in 2 streets. It could be 4 and
The
5.
area
Yeah.
rather than the neighborhood.
Correct.
Okay. Okay. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no other questions, then we are going to, Madam Clerk, do we have any public comment?
No, we do not.
Okay, thank you. And at this point, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make the motion to adjourn.
Okay, motion by trustee Bolin, second by trustee Becker. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye, okay. We are adjourned and we will see you in 5 minutes. Okay. Good evening, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and call to order the meeting of the City of Bloomington Council. If everyone could stand, if you're able to, and remain standing for a moment of silence.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
Okay, Madam Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Councilmember Walsh.
Here.
Councilmember Bolin. Here. Councilmember Motney.
Here.
Councilmember Emig. Councilmember Becker.
Here.
Councilmember Urban. Councilmember Ward. Here. Councilmember Craybill.
Here,
Councilmember Crumpler.
Here.
Mayor Millwambley.
Here. The next item on the agenda is public comment. Madam Clerk, do we have any public comment?
We do. We had two emailed public comments, one from Elizabeth Megley and one from Jacqueline Bayer. And then we have 6 individuals registered for in-person public comment.
Okay. Public comment is an opportunity for speakers to provide their views and feedback to the city council. It is also an opportunity for the city council to listen and hear diverse points of view. To maximize the impact of public comment and show respect for the expression of all views, speakers should maintain civility and focus on city issues. Speakers must identify themselves for the record, but are not required to give their address. Each speaker is given the floor for 3 minutes, and the council does not respond or engage in debate. Any speaker that engages in threatening or disorderly behavior will be deemed out of order and their time seized. And just as a reminder, there's a timer usually on the screens. And if I stop you, it's not because I'm rude, but just to keep it fair for everyone. So you go ahead with the first one.
First up, we have Ashley P. Pettit.
Okay.
Hi, as she said, my name is Ashley Pettit. I will keep my comments brief as I emailed all of you on this topic within the last week. I'm here to offer comment on the development at Morris Avenue and Lutz Road. I'm not asking you to undo things that have already been done, nor to place unnecessary constraints on the developer working to ensure additional housing for our community. I understand and agree that more options are needed as our community grows. But as the daughter of a Luther Oaks resident, I am compelled to voice opposition to this plan and appeal to you for traffic controls and safety improvements as work proceeds. Residents of Luther Oaks rely on Lutz Road as their primary and only viable entrance and exit. Emergency vehicles are routinely called to Luther Oaks and use the same route. They will now be sharing these roads with literally hundreds of other vehicles. I ask you to closely scrutinize zoning standards 4 and 5, which require adequate access roads and adequate ingress and egress to minimize congestion. I understand this is a subjective process, and part of that enables you to consider the surrounding area of the proposed development. In this case, a very large senior living community. Some of the city's own analysis acknowledges increased congestion and the substandard nature of these roadways. So let's focus on the facts and what we know. Cars routinely travel in excess of 40 miles per hour on Morris Avenue. There are no turn lanes on Morris Avenue nor Lutz Road. There are no shoulders, no sidewalks for pedestrian traffic, no signals, no flashing lights. There are no signs along Morris Avenue to alert them to incoming vehicles entering from Lutz Road. There is limited visibility due to rises in the road, both north and south of the Lutz entry point. There is a single stop sign at Lutz Road. This is a dangerous intersection today and one that will only deteriorate with increased volume of drivers and traffic. What we also know, you have an opportunity to provide coordination across city departments and services, to prioritize safety and traffic flow controls equal to expansion, and to provide proactive leadership in ways that bring together the city, developers, and residents as our community continues to grow. Let's not leave safety and traffic flow to chance. I appeal to each of you to engage on this topic and act. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Okay, thank you, Ashley. Next.
Next, we have Jacqueline Bayer.
I think that was the written public comment, wasn't it?
She also registered for in person.
Oh, in person. Okay.
If she's not here, then we can go on to Robert Kelly.
Good evening.
Yeah.
I'm also here to talk in opposition to the development that Ashley Pettit just spoke about. Many residents have significant concerns about this development, as evidenced by the turnout tonight, emails that I know a number of you have received, and I've had personal visits with Ms. Bolin and Mr. Schonkweiler of Public Works. One reason I oppose this development is that city staff's comments and conclusions related to meeting the required standards are sometimes subjective, others are not supported, and some need additional study. For example, the city is relying on a future interior road within Wittenberg Woods to help with congestion, but that road is only to be built if the developer decides to do so at some point. Secondly, instead of Public Works affirming that road access is adequate, staff's report just states Public Works does not oppose the development. Not really an affirmation. Thirdly, the city describes Morris Avenue as substandard with no guarantee of future upgrades. No additional improvements are planned for Lutz Road, and the applicant's comments themselves provided admission that there will be congestion. These shortfalls indicate a lack of road adequacy and no minimization of congestion, resulting in a failure to satisfy standards 4 and 5. In addition, numerous safety issues are not being addressed. Those include limited visibility from the 2 dips in Morris Avenue, inadequate road quality and access due to a substandard Morris handling the burden, frequent excessive speeding, an estimated 24% or more increase in vehicles per day in this section. Reduced emergency response time, particularly as Ashley mentioned, to Luther Oaks, where many frequent calls occur. As a result, the proposal also fails to meet standard 1 that addresses safety. In addition, I believe a more in-depth traffic safety study with a new set of eyes is critical here. Mr. Schonkweiler's engineering staff, as he relayed to me, concluded no developer-funded traffic study was needed, according to the city. However, he created doubts in my mind when he described part of the city's traffic analysis of how many new vehicles are acceptable to be based on, in his words, an arbitrary number. Also, staff's review of additional vehicles did not consider either the 40 housing units planned in the next phase of Wittenberg Woods development, nor did it contemplate the 10 homes at the south end of Wittenberg that are currently either under construction or yet to be occupied for the first time. In closing, we understand more housing is needed, but to do your due diligence on this matter, I recommend you pull this item from the consent agenda for the discussion it deserves, but don't settle for conditions that were added that do nothing to improve road adequacy, congestion, and safety. And please don't take the attitude, well, if we're wrong, we'll fix it later. It's critical that you reassess whether the standards of review that are required have been met and require a comprehensive external study that addresses all issues, whether fixable or not, before you make a final decision. Thank you for listening.
Next, we have
Thank you.
Gary Lambert.
Yeah.
My name is Gary Lambert. Last Monday, you had a meeting. And on there was an item called consideration of the 2022 tax levy. We had one councilman ask some questions about that levy. We had another councilman call a point of order saying that wasn't on the agenda. In fact, that's specifically what was there. We had another councilman say that, oh, when he was newly on the council, he asked a lot of questions also. I went out and looked at the Open Meetings Act. It says the Illinois Open Meetings Act provides the people of the state of Illinois with the right to be informed as to the conduct of public business. The OMA declares that it is the intent of the act that public bodies take action, vote in open meetings, and that public bodies deliberate openly, not behind closed doors with the city manager, not in 3-on-1 meetings. While that meets the letter of the law in not having a full quorum present, it certainly is not the intent of the law. I would welcome more questions, not fewer. Different topic. Was reading through, I think it was a radio station's article, that the mayor came out in support of the Unit 5 election. That's fine. That's his prerogative. But what he did do, he repeated the lie that increasing the taxes will in fact reduce them. If anybody can explain that to me, I'd be forever grateful. Next week, we're going to have hearing on the levy. I would ask that we provide at that meeting the head count that is proposed for this year and perhaps the last couple of years. Everyone says, in fact, one member quoted it, we have a fiduciary responsibility to the systems. And yes, we do. That doesn't include expending every penny we can get our hands on and constantly increasing our staff. Thank you.
Next.
Next, we have Scott Steinle.
Scott Steimling, Ward 5. The Public Works people, they had come out to empty the garbage and the recycling. The recycling can was not empty. I had to call them back. The clerk's office said that they were no longer allowed to print the packets because of the expense. I sure don't recall the city upgrading the roads where they should be, Tim. I don't recall the city raising the storm inlets. I don't recall the city updating the sidewalks where they should be. I've seen people that have been walking and they turn around and use the street, and the street's worse yet, and they just go back to their house. That speaks real well for the city, doesn't it? I understand that you are not printing these packets to save on costs, but Tim, if you would be really concerned about every dime the city spends, you wouldn't spend a lot of stuff. Why don't they get rid of the city cars and let you use your own car and pay you a mileage allowance? That's another expense that the people could do without. That, you know, you could go up and down the list all day and you could find something that the people could do without. The city claims that it would inflate their costs. Are they willing to risk a job like that for that amount of money? What about the fireworks? Are they going to be canceled this year? Put that money right in the roads. But you're afraid that they would offend people and they'd go to Normal because Normal has theirs and you have to have yours. Since when does Bloomington and Normal have to match each other? Maybe it's a long time we passed, merge Bloomington and Normal and be done with it, you think? We need one city manager, one mayor, one city council, and the city council serves at will. They don't want to serve at will, they don't serve. I'm all for the ward system, but elect them by ward, but at large. And the reason for saying that, they could be voted off that council very easily. You take any ward and that ward is protected by that ward. If you have them at large, all of them, you could get all the representation from one side of the city. That's not fair to the people that are not represented. I think you get my message. And let's say term limits. And everybody serves at will. They wouldn't be able to make a career out of it. Thank you.
Next.
Lastly, we have Liz Pierce.
I got away on Thanksgiving by, I promised someone I'd go to where there was a meal for people. When I bought this house, the woman threatened, they pick people out to go after, and they ruin people's relationships. The next couple of houses north, basically, as I was taking a shower to try to get to where this dinner was, I realized it's my nervous system at my neck and everything with that minimal, when I bought the house, it's being affected down my spinal cord. This is really a unprecedented, powerful decibel. I ended up getting to Menards and I talked to a guy that reminded me of a musketeer, a young guy. And seems like when I look back, he had this cell phone right there. I had said, he said, well, you could fight him back with monster amps booming. I said, yeah, but two wrongs don't make a right. And he said something and I said, well, maybe I'll pray God will get him. Yeah. Good and bad, depending on what religion, how they pray. But when it got to not less than 6 hours later, 3:30 in the morning, after I get home, and I raised the garage door 2-3 times, I went ahead and slid off the bed, grabbed my Harley half-shell helmet. I don't have a Harley. Headset over my ears, through the cane, crawled, through the cane, crawled, got in. There was no getting down the hall. Got into another room behind the door, on my knees, and just like hunkered down. It was devastating. Real high shrill. And then they do the typical thing of put on high, loud, screaming vocals. Okay. Usually I'm diving for the floor or I'm trying to get to the garage and I don't have my cane, but I forgot it. I forgot where I put it because I didn't eat anything until 12 hours later, 3 p.m. Sunday. Because my nervous system was that much impacted. I mean, they're using I think they get a thrill out of knowing the exact decibel. I don't believe it's police. I don't know that I would not put it past them to have lied successfully against me since professors, one retiring who's an attorney down in Missouri had the other call, do not speak to 1209, oops, and our chief, I had the breast cancer's Pasquale, but he was kind enough to have me, it backed up what these professors said. But I found a lovely set of houses off-country club. I've
I'm-
watched
I'm
him for
sorry,
11.
Your 3 minutes are up.
Oh, darn.
Sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So we're going to move on to recognition and appointments. And with item 6A, recognition of the fall 2022 Bloomington 101 participants. And our presenters are Catherine Murphy, our communications and external affairs manager, and Amy Overton, executive assistant for administration. Did you want to make comments? Brett? Okay.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This is quite the opportunity to recognize the participants that went through this several-week program, but also wanted to recognize our two staff members. To my left, Amy Overton, and to my right, Catherine Murphy, who really did all of this. There was a lot of department effort, but they're the ones that did all the coordination. And this program is what it is because of you. So thank you.
Thank you, City Manager Gleason. Thank you. We really have to say that it was because of this amazing group that we had that turned out, that we're very curious about how Bloomington works, what goes into making our city tick from the inside out. And they got some really great experiences. They got to go behind the scenes at Miller Park Zoo. Really, a lot of the effort does go to the departments that took part, from finance to ECD, Parks and Rec, Cultural Arts. So we really had such a great support system in getting this done. And we have several of the participants who showed up this evening that we'd love to also recognize for being here. So if you've been there, come on and stand up. Dawn and Susan and Mary and Brandon, and I believe Deborah is here as well. So Deborah spoke last week actually at the meeting about her experience at Bloomington 101. So we really thank them, and we thank all of the people that here at the city that really helped us in getting it launched and underway. So 8 weeks this year, we'll get it fired back up for next summer and tell everybody to sign up.
Okay, awesome. How many participants did you have in total?
We had just under, I can't do that math. We had about 20.
Okay,
So,
that's awesome. Thank
was great.
you
Thank
all
you.
very much for the work that you've done, but also thank you to the participants. I know 8 weeks is quite a commitment, but I realize that you've gotten to do some really cool stuff. I think some of you got behind some refuse trucks, right? Is that correct? Yeah, yeah. That's awesome. Well, thank you all very much. Appreciate it. Okay, the next item on the agenda is a public hearing on a request for annexation for DKS Properties Incorporated for land located at 2318 West Market Street, consisting of 1.10 acres, more or less, as requested by the Economic and Community Development Department. I am going to go ahead and call this public hearing to order, and the time is now 6:25. And we are going to move to staff introduction. Correct? So Kimberly.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. This is the public hearing for an annexation. It's a small piece of property, slightly over 1 acre, by DKS Properties, located at 2318 West Market Street. Wednesday, November 2nd, the Planning Commission voted 6-0 to recommend approval of the annexation agreement. Again, this is just the public hearing. You have on the consent agenda 4 other cases. One is the annexation agreement itself. That would be a resolution approving that. Then the ordinance that would bring this piece of property back into the city, and then followed by a preliminary plan and a final plat. And they're all right together. I wanted to introduce David Armstrong, attorney for the applicant, to say a few words as well. And I believe he needs to be
If you sworn in,
sworn in.
yes.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
I'll keep my comments brief. Originally, when the preliminary plan was done a number of years ago, it was in 2004, I believe. I don't know why this property was not annexed into the city at that time. But as further development has gone on in this area, it's kind of created what amounts to a hole in the middle of the city with the county property. That creates two problems. We have two different, codes that we're dealing with. But it also creates the issue of we have M1 zoning right along Avalon Way and Market Street where this sits for this property that's in the county. So we'll also fill in this hole and create a contiguous amount of B1 zoning all through the first part of that. Kim did point out correctly that there are some other items on the agenda today that we're also asking for approval. The first is the annexation agreement for this particular tract, but also the preliminary plan was out of date. And we are also asking that the preliminary plan be reinstated in substantially the same form that it was before, which will also allow us to sell off a lot. That's going to lead to some more development. And there's actually a few other tracts which might be sold directly to the south. So we are starting to see some development in this area. And I would ask that the annexation be approved so we can move forward with the other plans. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. At this point, I'd like to ask if there is anyone from the public that wants to speak to come forward. And individuals will be allowed to speak only once, and we ask that you keep your remarks to 5 minutes or less so that we can get through everyone that desires to speak. Okay, seeing none, I'm gonna turn it over to council to see if there are any questions. Councilmember Walsh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have a quick question here. I'm looking at the annexation agreement. And there's two parts in here dealing with the sanitary sewer and the water. And the wording here puzzles me. And the wording is the parties acknowledge and note that via a previous agreement, the owner may have already paid any and all tap fees for connection to the sanitary sewer. And the same wording there for water. And so in both of these, it's saying the parties may have paid. And then the stipulation that it be, if it's not all paid, that it would be paid, et cetera. I'm curious, and it puzzles me, do we not know if the tap-on fee has been paid?
And city staff and I've talked to engineering about that, and we don't know. And so we need to come to a determination with the city as to whether or not that has been paid. Part of that confusion lies in the fact that when this property was never annexed in. However, it was included by air in a preliminary plan that was previously filed and approved by the city. So that language was included in negotiations with the city council, Mr. Jurgens, to allow us some time to get it figured out if it actually was paid. And we're still looking into that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Other questions? Okay, seeing no other questions, and I'm gonna go ahead and close the public hearing at 6:30. Thank you. Okay, now we're going to move to the consent agenda. And is there a motion, or I think there are, you want to remove an item, right? Okay.
Yes, I would like to pull 8N as in Nancy.
Anybody else?
8K.
Okay.
I would like to pull 8I and 8T.
8T as in Tom
Yes.
Crumpler?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. And Councilmember Cribble, you had your light up? Oh, 8T, okay. Everybody loves Tom today. Um, okay, so is there a motion to approve the consent agenda with the exception of items 8N, 8K, 8I, and 8T?
I'll move approval.
I'll second.
Okay, motion by Councilmember Ward and second by Councilmember Bolin. Are we doing the link?
We're having a little bit of difficulty with the link, so we're just gonna do a quick roll call.
Roll call, okay. One second.
Councilmember Welch,
Aye.
Councilmember Bolin,
Aye.
Councilmember Motney,
Yes.
Councilmember Becker,
Yes.
Councilmember Ward. Aye. Councilmember Crable,
Yes.
Councilmember Crumpler.
Yes.
Okay. The consent agenda with the exception of the items 8 and K, I, and T passes with no nays to announce. And now we're going to consider the items that were removed in the order that they were removed. So we'll start with item 8N, as in Nancy. Councilmember Bolin.
Okay, this item has to do with the development or the proposed development at Morris Avenue and Lutz Road. I have not had an opportunity to talk to the chief engineer. And I was wondering if I could ask him some questions. If he's here.
Greg?
You can sit. I'm aware that you went out there to view the location and had a discussion about traffic study or traffic volume. Can you share what your opinion is or what you feel?
Sure. So the city does not have a set threshold to drive a traffic study. That is something that we've been discussing internally to establish in the upcoming year. Generally speaking, though, there's guidelines that are industry standard guidelines where developments would meet certain thresholds. And again, this is kind of where the arbitrary comment comes from, is the arbitrary threshold is 100 vehicles generated in the peak hour. In this particular case with Wittenberg Woods development, our traffic engineer ran some numbers from it's basically takes an industry standard generated traffic for an apartment complex per unit. In this case, we had 56 units. There was 30 trips generated in the morning and 40 in the evening peak hours. So not close to the 100. There are also other industry standards that have to do with the amount of commercial space, which doesn't apply here, or industrial space. The other things we look at is, would there be other mitigating factors that would drive a study? We didn't see anything from our review. We looked at the crashes at Lutz and Morris. We found one crash in a 5-year period. We looked at Wittenberg Woods Drive and Morris. We found 0 crashes in a 5-year period. We actually went back another 5 and didn't find any crashes in a 10-year period. When we also looked at the amount of traffic on Morris, there's currently about 1,700 vehicles a day. This development would generate about 400 vehicles. That added to the low volume on Morris didn't flash anything to us to be of concern here. We also looked at the sight lines exiting off of Morris, off of Lutz, and we didn't see anything that drove an immediate correction of Lutz and Morris or Wittenberg Woods Drive and Morris. So what we look for is triggers to say to a developer, yes, you need to do a study. We didn't see those triggers. We weren't even close to those triggers. So that's why Public Works did not require a traffic impact study.
Yeah, fair enough. I'm going to put you on the spot here. You probably don't have this number. Maybe Kevin does. How would that compare to Fox Creek Road? Volume
You did,
estimate,
you did put me on the spot.
5 times,
Um,
1 time? I mean, double?
okay, yeah, Kevin's gonna look it up.
Kevin, look at.
Yeah,
oh,
There's a
okay.
lot of numbers out there, but, I mean, when you're talking about Fox Creek Road or Hamilton
Correct.
Road,
Correct.
you know, those are, 4-lane roads with a
Well,
center turn lane.
except for the substandard.
Right,
So, yeah.
right, right,
That's, and that basically is the only way out of that area.
right, correct.
So, yeah.
Right. So typically, those, I'll just give a range. They're usually 10,000 to 15,000 vehicles per day on
Okay.
Hamilton.
Okay.
You know, so that significantly less on Morris. I should point out, though, we did look at traffic speeds and we did see higher speeds than what we'd like to see out there. And we do acknowledge
That's
that.
standard procedure out in Ward 2.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's another question. It's a county road right at Lutz. I mean, Morris begins to be a county road. Is there any control, speed control, changing speed limit that would help?
That is something that we can look into. The current posted speed limit is 40 mile an hour and we will look into speed reduction. However, though, is, you know, speed can be modified with a speed limit sign and we could try to drop it to 35, but then you get also enforcement issues. Folks are quite frankly coming in from the south, you know, the country area into the city at that point, or they're in turn leaving from Hamilton Road and going out. The best that we can expect is some type of enforcement that could occur. I often get asked about the use of stop signs. And when we look to install stop signs, say at Lutz and Morris, and when I'm talking about that, I'm talking about an always stop, which would be stopping traffic on Morris as well as Lutz. Currently, there's no stop on Morris. We don't, per the national guidelines, use speed or stop signs to control speed. In turn, we looked at the threshold for warranting stop signs and it's not even close to meeting these warrants. Some of the warrants are the number of crashes in a 12-month period, like say 5. Right now, it's not there. Traffic volumes that would be probably 3 or 4 times as high. Delay on the side street to get on to the main street. It's not there. So we didn't see the need for that. Not only that, when you install stop signs and they're not warranted, they can then lead to people blowing through those. That particular location, if we did put up stop signs, and I was talking with our traffic engineer about that even today, we both feel that that would not be a suggested approach. It could actually give a false sense of security. And we'd have to really sign that on the approaches because people will blow those stop signs. And then that could be a far more severe accident than what we would expect. It's okay for people to have to take, you know, and have caution when they enter into a major road. We don't want to give that false sense of security. So it was 5,800. Fox Creek is 5,800. What about to the east?
So that's like 4 or 5 times the volume. You mentioned that there's a lot of traffic coming from the south on Morris. Is that, that's the county?
Right, a fair, I would say it's usually split. Looking at the map here, and we're looking at an Illinois Department of Transportation map. As you proceed from the south, like the south end of Prairie Vista Golf Course, there's about 900 vehicles in a day. Then it goes up to about 1,700, and then when you get north of Hamilton, it's about 2,550, 2,550.
Because, well, I mean, I've been looking at the maps and like crazy. The only thing south of Lutz Road that's significant is Brigham School. And Morris does not have access to the interstate. So it's basically a country road with farmers maybe driving. So coming from the south, I would think that the traffic volume would be less than coming from Hamilton.
It looks like you're correct.
Yes, okay. Thank you.
Okay. Any
Don't
other-
go too far away. I may have more questions, but I have done my due diligence and nobody out there or on this council can argue that. The staff will testify that I have driven them crazy with questions and clarification. So I'm gonna have a lengthy comment. Bear with me. Chapter 44, section 1701, definition of special use. The purpose is to judge land use. That special consideration be given to the characteristics of the surrounding property and the impact which those would have on adjoining nearby properties. We are not necessarily talking about public roads. The category here is entirely private in character, but may give rise to unique impact on the neighboring property or public facilities. The currently vacant property at the corner of Lutz and Morris is private property owned by the developer. Private property owners have rights guaranteed by the U.S. Constitution, but also must conform with the municipal code. The public hearing at the Zoning Board of Appeals is mandatory as part of the right of due process to ensure that the private property rights of all are not infringed upon. It's a time to gather sworn testimony from the petitioner and the opposition, and it's my understanding that additional testimony can't be considered without the item being remanded back to the zoning board. This council is bound by law when making these decisions. And I'm going to quickly review the standards because they were addressed as a comment. Number one, that the establishment, maintenance, or operation of the special use will not be detrimental to or endanger the public health, safety, comfort, or general welfare. Again, we are talking about land use. What is being put on the land is residential, which matches the adjacent properties. Let's see. Chapter 44, section 13-1-8, purpose and intent of landscaping and screening is to protect the public health, safety, and general welfare. That's from the zoning code. Number two, that the special use will not be injurious to the use and environment or enjoyment of other property in the immediate vicinity of for the purposes already permitted in an R2 mixed residential district, nor substantially diminish and impair property values within the district or within the neighborhood. Chapter 44, section 13-1-2, general purpose and intent, landscaping and screening. The landscaping, screening, and buffering provisions of this section shall apply to all new multifamily and non-residential development, including principal and accessory structures. All planting materials used in required screens shall be evergreen variety. Other plant materials may be used upon approval by Economic and Community Development Director. Chapter 44, section 13-1-6, landscaping areas. The transitional yard landscaping requirements shall be applied to multifamily and non-residential uses in addition to any buffer yard or screening requirement specified in the district regulations and use provisions. Chapter 44, Section 13-1-8, additional screening requirements. Areas of low visual interest or visually intrusive, such as the detention basin, site elements such as trash collection, mechanical equipment, open storage service areas, loading docks, and blank walls shall be screened from off-site view. And for those who think that landscaping is simply cosmetic, or that the developer is doing a favor, landscaping is included in landscaping, including the preservation of trees, is a requirement of the zoning code that is added to the recommendations from the Zoning Board of Appeals in what's being presented tonight. Say, number 3, that the establishment of the special use will not impede the normal and orderly development and improvement of the surrounding property for those permitted in the zoning district. Again, R2 mixed residential. If you look at the site plan, it is the same. Or it's basically, the density is the same and allowed less than 13 units per acre. And they're single family and single family detached and attached. Number 4, the adequate utilities, access roads, drainage, and or necessary facilities have been or will be provided. There is a detention basin going in for storm water control. That also is pretty much standard now with new development. That will help prevent any kind of runoff from the parking of at the apartment complex. It will also help with any kind of water issue that is occurring or might occur on those homes that back up to this development. The public facilities, including sewers and the upgrade of Lutz Road, as well as sidewalks that will be put in from Handel to Morris Avenue, are planned. Timberline and tree line will be constructed by the developer. And if you can look at the site plan, Wittenberg Woods Phase 2 is complete and they are moving on to Phase 3. There is a need for not only apartment buildings or apartment units, but also single family. And those units along tree line and timber line will be single family units. Morris Avenue will be brought up to standard, up to city standard with the funding of the developer. It's, correct me if I'm wrong, it's pretty much standard practice that substandard county roads are not upgraded until development occurs. City is not going to put in brand new roads with vacant lots sitting next to them. Number 5, that adequate measures have been or will be taken to provide ingress and egress designed to minimize traffic congestion, not eliminate, in the public streets. The entrance to the multifamily is a separate entrance and will be on Woods Road, which is built to city standards. It does not have a curb on the south side because that's the county line. When development occurs on that side, curbs will be put in, and who knows, it might even be widened. Let's see. Oh, and also there's a lower speed limit on Morris Avenue. There were similar comments about congestion. and access to Luther Oaks when phase two began development and Handle Road was being connected to Lutz Road. So this is not anything, I've heard this before, and as evidenced by what the engineer explained, over the past 5 years, accidents have not increased. The volume has been pretty much steady. I know it will increase, but not significantly as opposed to the volume on Fox Creek Road. And if you look at the map, the GIS map, there's going to be minimal development in the future. The golf course runs from Hamilton to Brigham School Road and all the way to Main Street. That is not going to be developed. To the south is the county, and unless we annex that, it will not be developed. So future development other than phase 3 in Wittenberg Woods will not be happening in the near future. Traffic control is the purview of Public Works. We will leave it up to them and will be addressed when Morris is upgraded to city standards using the funds of the developer. For those who think I'm failing to represent their best interests, please note that Morris Avenue is likely to remain substandard without the development of the phase 3 of Wittenberg Woods. And please be aware that the upgrade to Lutz Road occurred during my tenure by way of an MOU with Luther Oaks. The city has fulfilled its obligation. I wonder if Luther Oaks has fulfilled theirs. Number 6, that the special use shall, in all other aspects, conform to the applicable regulations the district is in which it is located, which again are 2 mixed residents, except as such regulations may be modified by the council pursuant to the recommendations of the zoning board. It's a mixed residential district with a density of less than 13 units per acre. The zoning board did not recommend any changes and no variances are being asked for. We cannot take any new testimony other than that was presented at the Zoning Board of Appeals. It would have to be remanded back. So those are the 2 options that I view. I will make a motion to approve and then we can have some discussion.
Okay, motion to approve by Councilmember Bull. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, second by Councilmember Crumpler. Discussion. Okay, so we have Councilmember Walsh, you had your light up,
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
and then we'll go with Councilmember Montney afterwards.
I keep hearing the number 1,700 in traffic. And I keep hearing that reference to Morris. What's the traffic per day on Lutz Road?
We don't have counts readily available, but when those are not shown on the DOT map, they're usually less than 400 to 300 per day.
Okay.
Typically,
And with that, so 300 to 400 per day on Lutz Road.
you
uh,
could
just-
safely assume that.
Safely assume that. But then I hear the 1,700 with an increase of about 400 per day for Morris. So if the traffic from this complex is coming out of the apartments onto Lutz Road, couldn't I safely assume that that's an increase of 400 per day on Lutz Road?
You could, given that tree line and timber line are not connected, yes, they would traffic would go to Lutz. Once tree line and timber line, some of that traffic will go to the north.
Okay, so we're looking at right now doubling the amount of traffic right there at that corner,
Sure,
at that intersection.
sure.
All right. When, and you had mentioned you went out and you did a sightline look. And I'm asking this because I actually went out and did, did some sightline looks and things like that. What kind of vehicle were you in when you checked the sightlines?
Sightlines are set up per guidelines, which is a certain distance above the ground, which
Okay.
represents the typical passenger vehicle, as
Okay.
if you were in a typical passenger vehicle. And you're looking not to see the full vehicle, but you're looking to see a part of the vehicle, to the north where the hill is at.
Okay.
So keep that in mind. Oftentimes people think they need to see the full vehicle. That's not the guidelines. The
right.
guidelines is if you see a part of the vehicle, that counts.
Okay, thank you. That's actually good to know. With phase 3 of Wittenberg Woods, how many additional units are going to be placed there? So an additional 40 units in phase 3 of Wittenberg.
I don't know the exact number of units. I mean,
The-
it would be hard-
Can I?
Yeah.
The apartment complex would be adding 56, I believe, and then there's 30 additional single-family attached, detached going
Okay.
into the timberline, tree line area.
Okay, so one single family generally generates one trip in the peak hour.
Okay.
An apartment complex unit generates more trips than a single family residential.
Okay, thank you. That's all I need.
Thank you, Councilmember Money.
Well, appreciate Councilmember Walsh asking those questions. That was what I was gonna ask as well. So overall, you're gonna see a 25% increase in traffic volume based on this development with the 400 on top of the 1,700 roughly. And then that was a really good catch that in this one street, you have the opportunity for that traffic to double if these assumptions are correct.
Yeah, that's correct, but I will clarify, 800, let's say it does double from 4 to 800. That road can more than handle 800 vehicles per day.
So what I'm thinking about and just thinking through this math in my head is what it's going to feel like to someone that lives there. So if you think about calendar day of 24 hours, but the majority of that traffic is going to be highly variable according to the hour of the day. Would that be fair?
It is, and we look at peak hours, so just to give you a relative feeling here, in the morning, we were looking at the peak hour of 30 vehicles. That's one every 2 minutes. And when we look at 40 vehicles in the evening, peak hour, that's one every 1.5 minutes.
So if I was thinking about this just in my own head, looking at most traffic occurring during a 16-hour period, I mean, if you just took that pattern of traffic and divided it out over 16 hours, you're going to get into that, 2 per minute range anyway.
Mhm.
So if you're truncating that into very specific lanes where you have very peak traffic, it would seem like those volumes would be significantly higher during those rush hour times. Is that fair? I'm wondering, Craig, if there's an arc that you use to distribute traffic volume over a 24-hour period, and what percentages do you allocate to various hours throughout that day?
So we don't get that. It's impossible to predict, a full day every hour. What we look at per the national standards is the peak hour, the main hour in the morning and the main hour in the evening. So that's showing 30 to 40, and then we use a rule. It basically is like 10% of the volume. So if you take 30 divided by 10, and then that's 300, 40 divided by 10 is to 400. So the guidelines though don't, I mean, these are national studies on like various developments. They don't, we can't get that precise to say, you know, every hour, this is what to expect. We look at the worst hour, the heaviest, busiest hour, that's the morning, and the evening. That's per national guideline.
Has your team done any direct observation during an hour like that, just to validate your own assumptions based on these national guidelines?
Yeah, I've been, you mean as far as when a development occurs and things like that?
Or in this case, for example, I mean, has someone sat there for an hour in the morning, an hour in the late afternoon during the peaks that you to tick mark, to click, how many cars they're observing?
We did do some counts and I have observed it. I didn't sit out there for an hour, but when any of these things come up, I drive through. I can tell you when I was there with a gentleman from the adjacent development and we sat at Lutz and Morris last week for a good 2-3 minutes before any cars came by. I'm just telling you, that's a factual sitting. So I don't see, it's not congested.
No, I do think that's something that would increase the public's confidence in us. Just reflecting back to my own experience on the planning commission, just thinking about the data that's available from national studies versus, you know, the actual data patterns from similar developments. I think it's an opportunity for us to get more precise and really understanding how we can better provide for safety in developments for the future. But thank you for answering my question.
Thank you. Okay, well, it doesn't look like we have any other questions. I think we're ready to vote then, because you had a motion and a second. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
We do have the electronic voting up and running.
Oh, it is, okay. All right. Electronic. Are we waiting for some?
Councilmember Ward, did you just want to do a voice vote?
Yeah, I can't get it to load. Sorry.
For or against?
Aye.
Okay. So the item passes. There are 2 nays to announce, Madam Clerk.
Councilmember Welch and Councilmember Motney.
Okay, thank you. So I think we're gonna move on to item 8K. I think which was Councilmember Motney.
Yes, I pulled 8K and, you know, placing this also in context of the discussion that we just had.
Can you get closer to the microphone?
Yes.
Oh, go ahead.
Do you want me to go
Yeah,
ahead?
yeah, just go ahead.
All right. So let me just state why I asked for this to be pulled. And I think it really kind of goes to a broader theme throughout this evening and throughout many of the discussions we have. Many of our discussions include comments such as, we're missing a lot of the data. We think we don't have an easy way to get to the data. We don't have a great way to find out. Those types of things I think we're allowing to be excuses when I believe there's an opportunity for us to be more precise with facts so that we can make better fact-based decisions. And when facts are lacking, I believe there's an opportunity then to articulate a hypothesis and used facts to base that hypothesis upon. And just again, in the context of the prior discussion, there's not concern with the bigger picture of what we're talking about. My concern is with the precision with which we can answer questions by the public and also by council. So when we discussed the issue of the Coliseum, we were asked to discuss the extension of a higher binding authority to act faster, to be able to book acts when opportunities present. On its face, I don't have an objection to that. During that discussion, though, I asked a question about whether or not the higher booked acts generally related to lower actual net return and higher losses for the city. And the answer to that question was yes. And what I asked for in turn was, tell me more. And that comment was made, well, we've got higher economic development as a result, and we also have higher food and beverage as a result. And that may be true. I simply asked, let's take one of these shows that we paid in that range for, and let's do a spot check to understand in that snapshot of time, did we see the impact that we believe occurred? I think that's a pretty straightforward thing to do, to kind of draw a circle, look at food and beverage tax in a period of time to be able to answer that question. I just like to see us do a better job creatively looking to test the hypotheses that we have so that we can understand with more facts if this is the right thing to do or not. Looking back myself and trying to find out how many shows we actually had in excess of 400K in the last few years, I was only able to find one. There may be many. And the net return on that show actually appeared to have been positive in about the 5 to 7% range, which is great. Again, the reason I pulled this is because I think there's a much better way to get more granular, more disciplined around the use of facts as we make these decisions.
Thank you. Is there a motion?
I'll move approval.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay. So motion by Councilmember Ward, second by Councilmember Craybill. And if you could go ahead and vote. So I need to start whistling like on Jeopardy.
Councilmember Motney, it's not showing your vote. Can you try hitting refresh?
3 times the charm.
There we go. All votes are in.
Yeah, there you go. All right, so the item passes. There are no nays to announce. The next item is item 8I, pulled by Councilmember Walsh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have a couple questions here. And this particular section is for the post office rental at the Market Street Garage. And I see a dumpster parked there at the Market Street Garage now. And I think this is a good opportunity to ask, how are the repairs going to the garage. And before I think we start talking about a 3-year rental agreement with the post office here, has the company performing the work found any additional work that they're going to be coming to the council and saying, give us some more green? And at the same time, we also know that, there's been lots of talk of Connect Transit coming to this council and saying, hey, we like that section of land. And so how would, if we find out in 6 months, we need to, for safety reasons, knock that garage down? How would that impact this rental agreement? And if Connect Transit comes to us and says, we'd like that piece of property, and we come to some mutual agreement, how would that impact this rental agreement?
Appreciate the question. The number of things here in the consideration, if this would become the Connect Transit transfer station site. And again, I must emphasize if, even though that is the selected site to advance the study and the consideration, if this was to materialize and become the site. We know that we've got a tenant, that we've got a standing lease, to your point, that it's definitely something in the negotiation that's being considered as a possibility. Because we do not want to lose that tenant. It's a ideal location in the downtown area. Shift gears, and I've actually got our facilities director, Russ Waller. Russ, if you want to comment to, I guess, an update on the garage repairs, and then also the lease agreement with the Postal Service.
Certainly. So the construction repairs that are active in the garage, they're about 30 to 40% complete. Barring any really, really bad weather, they are on task to be done by the end of the year. So another month of work or 2 months of work, 1 month of work, they should be complete. And as of yet, they have not brought any additional work to us. Basically, they're sticking with the work that was bid. We've not found any additional need. And per our consultant that did the analysis and shows up on occasion whenever they get to a major issue, any kind of major point that they need to look at, they'll bring the consultant down. He'll look at it, basically see if there's any additional work. He keeps looking at the garage every time he comes, and he is not finding any additional repairs beyond what was bid. So I think we're in good shape. I will not be coming back to council unless something bad happens, but we're anticipating good thoughts there, and not going to expect any additional work to be done. So the repairs that have been essentially bid per the structural engineer we've hired said that will get us 2 to 3 years of additional life in the garage, which fits quite well with this schedule based on my involvement with some of the work that's being talked about, the city manager discussed. That gets us to a good spot as to what decisions are going to be made at that point. Beyond 3 years, I can't speak to that. We'll have to go with at that point, but it gives us basically the time period that the lease is going to cover. It's actually just a 2-year lease extension. So shouldn't be any issue with basically doing that. There is some clauses in there that the post office can cancel the lease if they choose to. We don't have that ability because we're offering the 2-year lease to them. They continue to ask for a longer one. They want to stay in the downtown, so we're doing everything we can to keep them there. But we needed the additional 2 years just to basically get a little farther into the issues that are you brought up.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to make a motion
Yes, make a motion to approve as
presented?
yes.
Okay. Motion by Councilmember Walsh. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, second by Councilmember Ward. And oh, sorry. I must have been thinking of Ward 3. That's what it is. Montney, Councilmember Montney. Okay, the item passes. There are no nays to announce. And then item 8T, Councilmember Walsh, once again.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On this particular item, we received a public comment from the Water Reclamation District. And that public comment raised some concerns to me for this, that I would want to hear more from them on their concerns before we start making this type of change. What concerns do they have regarding the water reclamation and making sure that we are A, taking care of our water, and B, making sure that we're following all applicable federal laws. I think those are two very important things that we need to address and hear more about before I think we can move forward on this.
Go ahead.
I am able to comment. Alderman Crable, I know that you and I had spoke about this. I was going to comment. I saw that your light was on, and I think I'll shut mine off for now.
Go ahead, Councilman.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I think it goes broader than that. And so what they're doing is so basically history, as I understand it, is this facility recycling facility was in an M1 zoning area. And they were operating, I don't know if the right word is illegally, but against the zoning code and having a recycling facility in an M1 area. Back in May, maybe, I think it was, of this year, they said, we would like to be rezoned as an M2, which has a special use permit for recycling. However, we rejected that based on the recommendation of city staff because they didn't meet a number of the requirements of that special use permit. What they've asked the city to do is to run this new definition through the planning commission and eventually back to council that would allow them to do what they're currently doing in under the M1 designation. So in a sense, that bothers me that we're going to be allowing them to do something that wouldn't otherwise be able to be done in M1 and which can't be done in M2, which is a more industrialized, I think, or higher manufacturing designation than M1. So, that's my concern, with this.
Appreciate the comments and I guess what I would share to the questions that have been asked, the requester of this and the property for which the request eventually would be made. There are issues with this, but staff in preparing this agenda item for council to consider tonight, we tried to step back and not look at the requester, not look at the property that this was for, and see if there was potentially value in a procedural change that would be approved by council that would allow, that would initiate text amendments with the plan commission. And so it's larger than just the specific request, even though we can't really think of any other examples that would ever come before council. So if this is approved tonight, and it does open the door for this, staff will be strongly recommending to not approve this at the plan commission level. So really, again, we tried to step back and take a look at something that did not include the requester or the property. So very good questions. And if council chose to turn this down, it ends tonight on this specific case.
I would like to make that motion to reject item 8T.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, so motion by Councilmember Craybill, second by Councilmember Ward. No, I would say he can make a motion to deny what was presented. Yeah, should be fine.
Okay.
It was Councilman Walsh, I said.
Wait.
Thank you, you're keeping me. Okay, so we have a motion and a second to reject the item that was presented.
And then,
No. Not at this time.
no, just during public comment. Mayor, I was gonna say you could handle this a couple of different ways. One, you could just not do a motion and then it would die for lack of a motion. But so the council is the only body, the only entity that can initiate a potential text amendment under our zoning code. So it's in your discretion whether or not you want to do this or not. But in this case, we do have a party that's asked us, staff, to bring this forward to the council. So if you want to do it as a motion, kind of, denying the staff recommendation or the proposed recommendation, then that would be, I believe, in order as well. So I think we've got a motion from Councilmember Crable, and then there was maybe a second
Councilman
by
Walsh. Yeah.
Councilmember Walsh, and that motion is to deny
Mhm.
the request. And so in that situation, if you vote yes, this would not move forward to the
Right.
planning commission.
That's how I understood it. Okay, so the item passes. There are no nays to announce. And by passing, I mean the motion to deny passes. Okay. I think we are moving to the next item on the agenda, which is the Finance Director's Report. And I'm going to turn it over to City Manager Gleason for introductory remarks.
Very brief, Mayor. We continue to track very well, but that's with the caveat that there are several items that we're trying to accomplish as a city. And there's also several additional costs. I know that everybody here is related to the pandemic, the supply chain, the availability of different materials that we're purchasing, large ticket items, also the availability of different contractors to do work. It's all having an impact, and that is a financial impact. So it's, we're reluctant, and Scott does a very good job of this, of explaining both sides of the tale of the city as we currently are realizing this, and I'll turn it over to Scott now.
Thank you, City Manager, Mayor, Council. Well, I think what the city manager was referring to, we kind of have two different components there, the reserves and potential longer term discussions related to the use of those, potentially capital expenditures, and then ongoing operations. So we're kind of like in this dynamic crossroads right now with inflation positively impacting revenues, but we're having somewhat of a delayed impact on our expenditures. The supply chain issues, you'll see in a moment here, of our capital expenditure line item, we've used 4.8% of it. There's certain things we just can't buy. So I'm going to try to provide just a little context to the numbers. We're 6 months in now, but with some of our sales tax revenues, it's only 4 months worth of revenues. So it's still earlier in the year, even though we're 6 months in. So we haven't updated the projections, but just a couple of more opening points. The federal COVID stimulus is approximated at about $5 trillion. A lot of that is still to be rolled out. Grants are being announced, all the time related to that. But I think the continuation of a lot of dollars in the economy is going to still occur, even with the Fed tightening. The latest inflation number is 7.7% over the last 12 months, and at October 31st, that's a significant number. So I'm going to comment as to what I think our exposure might be in the general fund for that. I looked at the last recessionary numbers back in 2008. We did have some in FY9, 2009, we had a slight sales tax increase. So I tried to adjust for that. So just in general, it looked like we had about a plus $3 million drop in our kind of our major tax revenues back then. At a higher kind of inflationary rate right now, if we go into a recession, we could be impacted significantly from that. And then also one other comment that kind of deviates a little bit from this train, those with our home rule sales tax, 20% of our home rule sales tax is restricted. So 10% goes to asphalt and concrete, and the other 10% goes to McLean County Health. So, we're seeing larger numbers and variances related to that, but those numbers aren't, part of or just a general fund revenues to be utilized as we wish. Those are designated from the get-go. So next slide, please. So I'm going to start here, in the left column on the worksheet, the annual budget. So some of these numbers, we came into the year with larger variances related to COVID and the stimulus and what we thought were going to be impacts. The income tax and the replacement tax are really two big categories where we're seeing these anomalies. The average for income tax pre-COVID was 8 million. We budgeted 9 million. Replacement tax, 2 million. We budgeted 2.5 because those were still trending higher. We thought there was going to be some residual impact from stimulus. You can see for income tax, we're almost $1.2 million positive variance year to date. Replacement tax, $1.6 million. So I just want to highlight, these are anomalies that we don't think are going to continue, forever. So when council's reviewing our financials, when we're making decisions that will impact, out through time, we have to keep in context, what's being driven by things that are out of our control at this point in time and what may then kind of go away. Something I'll highlight in a moment here when we get into the expenditures, I kind of look at our general fund as having about $30 million in budgetary expenses that could be impacted by inflation. Those are commodities, our contractuals, and our capital expenditures. So if we experience a 7.7%, a roughly inflationary impact on that $30 million of $120 million budget. So I'm saying that a lot of our budget is not impacted. Most of our comp and salaries and benefits is not going to be impacted by inflation this year. Pensions, those are locked for the year, the contribution amounts, but our commodities, contractuals, capital expenditures, we could be looking at a $2 to $3 million positive expense variance. So just putting that in context related to the positive variance that we see at the bottom of this exhibit, the 5.3 million, knowing that the expenditures, the other side of inflation, it's a delayed impact that we could be looking at. And then also just highlighting that on the home rule sales tax, we're $853,000 positive variance year to date. 171,000 of that, is restricted for asphalt and concrete. These are good things in McLean County Health. So just, there's a lot of dynamic activity related to our financials. So just trying to keep that in context for council and the community. Next slide, please. Revenues, just a couple of quick comments here. There's been discussion about new revenues. I've been talking about new revenues over the last year, but I just want to highlight that, those are built into the FY23 budget, the revenues related to online, retail, and cannabis. So right now, the prior exhibit showed that our revenues are doing well. If you look at the use, the percent of revised, budget use, those are supposed to be kind of a number that we can use to track versus trend. We have a lot of seasonality in our revenues, so those are a little difficult to kind of like get any meaning from right now, but there's no concerns. We're doing well in our revenue categories. Next slide, please. Expenditures. Again, going to start in the left column, the revised budget. So salaries and benefits. Yes, we did increase staff in 23. Specifically, we're related to IT, some significant increases. When I went through the council presentations for the community as well for the adopted budget, proposed budget last year, we were showing about a $3.2 million increase in salary and benefits. So, of our new revenues, a lot of our new revenues went towards paying for that additional staff. We thought we needed to initiate or address some initiatives around the city, specifically in the IT area. The commodities, contractuals, commodities, and capital expenditures, that 8.6 million, 5.6 million, excuse me, 13.6 million first for contractuals, 8.6, 5.6 million for capital expenditures. Those are the categories I'm seeing that are vulnerable to inflation. So, our suppliers are going to be driving up those costs, if we can get it, even get the items. You can see in our capital expenditures line, we've only spent $267,000 year to date. This is the general fund, 4.8%. So having trouble, finding vehicles, et cetera. But, that's an impact that, we are going to be confronted with, I believe, down the road. I have mentioned previously with expenditures, we can't control costs, but we can manage them. So management usually means, controlling the timing. Whether or not we push it out until prices come back down, then maybe we won't have the impact, but we'll have to budget it in the coming fiscal year. But if we do need that, then we may end up paying more for it later. And then reserves, we'll be discussing that with council, in the coming weeks. Next slide, please. The enterprise funds, revenues are tracking. I think a couple of councils ago, the impacts of inflation and supply chains became very evident with the Fort Jesse tank replacement, where that project was literally going to be $500,000 higher than the original budget. So with our enterprise funds, revenues are fairly locked in. I mean, these are consumption-based, usage-based kinds of revenues. So, the impact from the current environment is really going to be on that cost side. Again, our directors can manage the timing. Certain things, cannot be delayed. But believe me, they work with finance, and trying to figure out what the best timing might be. And if it has to occur now, well, that's what the reserves are for if we need them. So like the water fund has pretty substantial reserves. They've got a lot of infrastructure they need to work on over the coming years, big studies going on, but at least in the short term, those reserves can accommodate any issues that come up related to the supply chain and inflationary impact. Next slide, please. And then just a reminder to community, these reports can be found online at the addresses showing on the screen. And at this point, I'll pause for questions or comments.
Questions? Councilmember Martin?
Hey, so for the last fiscal year, I'm going to use the word attainment. I don't know what word you would use to describe the percentage of the budget that was actually consumed in actual expense. What percent of our budget was spent in the most recent fiscal year that we had a complete cycle?
Well, I can't do that off the top of my head, but what we were under, I mean, we were typically always under. A lot of that is in our vacancy savings and contractuals.
So I guess that I didn't know the answer to that, but it's almost always true in the private sector too. So when we say things like these new revenue sources are already in our budget, I just wanted to make the point that that doesn't mean we're going to spend that. Again, just putting that out there. So do you happen to know what our delta was then on the most recent full cycle? How much?
If we have to kind of like discuss whether or not we're talking about the general fund or the enterprise funds, because
I'm talking about total all-in expense.
yeah, because I don't know, because when you talk about the total citywide budget, that's where you get into a lot of these delays in capital projects. I mean, the state motor fuel tax fund, that's part of the citywide budget. And that Fox, that whole $15 million project has been bumped every year. So the citywide budget deviates tremendously from a capital expenditure standpoint. And bumping of projects due to timing or other issues. With the general fund, I mean, we had a real positive excessive variance in tax revenues last year. It was through the roof. I think it was a $17 million positive variance on the taxes. On the expenditure side, I can't remember the underage, but we were under.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is city manager's discussion. Thank you, Scott.
Thanks, Scott. Mateus, I think I have 3 slides, I believe, 4 slides. Small Business Saturday is this Saturday and next. Shop small, like we've heard many of the local business owners ask. And it's something that we push out through our economic development support to the community. Next slide. Wild Lights at the zoo, multiple dates that can be found on the city's website. And then also Skate with Santa. I think the deputy can't even say it, but horrible way to finish the night. Deputy city manager will be there in his sweater. Next slide, please. All right, downtown. This is bad, and I started it, so I only have myself to blame.
Got the giggles.
All right, downtown Bloomington, Once Upon a Holiday, December 2nd from 4:45 to 8 o'clock. And the J.C.'s first. I can't do this. This is horrible. All right, Holiday Farmers Market. It's at Grossinger Motors Arena, and it is inside December 17th. Orders can be placed. You can find that in the city's website. Pickup, I think also. Are we doing pickup, Melissa? So it is actually at the Grossinger Motors Arena. So additionally, in addition to the slides, I wanted to wish everyone happy holidays. We do have some good weather, and hope that people can come out to the First Friday event this Friday. And that will be the tree lighting, and that is our last First Friday event. Thanks.
Yes.
Sorry about that.
And do we bring our sweaters? Okay, and the mayor's comment, the only thing I have is that the tree lighting ceremony, I will not be there because I will be out of town, but our very own Mayor Pro Tem, Donna Bolin, will be there replacing me, and I'm sure doing a much finer job because she has a much better sense of humor and she's a lot more fun to be around. Right? And with that, I'm gonna ask if council members have a comment.
I'm gonna ask Billy to join me in his sweater.
I just have a question. Does anybody know, and perhaps this has come up, the sculptures that are going up just south of downtown, just past the railroad tracks? Does anybody know anything about that? It's really kind of neat. It catches your eye as you drive over the overpass, and then you drive around and you see what it is. It's kind of a neat little sculpture there.
It is, that actually is Tom Kirk of Henson Disposal. He owns some of the property in the warehouse district, and you do see that. His vision is to have something, in our warehouse district that's very similar to the City Museum in St. Louis. So it's exciting what he's putting together, and I guarantee there's more to come.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, seeing no other lights, is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll make the motion to adjourn.
Okay, motion by Councilmember Bolin, second by Councilmember Becker. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Okay, we are adjourned. See you.